Today we will be covering 11.2. Okay, the book problems. There will be a worksheet video coming out most likely tomorrow. But for right now, here's 11.2. Okay, and I may opt to kind of go back on some of those worksheets because there were several of them in that packet that I gave you. So I will keep you posted on that. And just as a reminder, okay, in case you haven't seen the email for some reason, everything this week will be turned in on Google Classroom. Okay, no exceptions. You will be turning it in there, not via email. If you send it in via email, I won't look at it. So make sure you post it there like everyone else. So 11.2. And in case you're wondering, yes, we did skip 11.1. That was on purpose. Simplify radical expressions. Okay, so our goal with radicals is to get them in their simplest form. So what is the simplest form? Well, what is the simplest form? Well, that means that for one, no perfect square, factors other than 1 are in the radicand. That just means inside the radical. No fractions are inside the radical. And no radicals appear in the denominator of a fraction. All right, so we have a property. Product property of radicals. All right, the product property of radicals says that the square root of AB, okay, so A times B is equal to the square root of A times the square root of B. Okay, this is not true for adding and subtracting. This is only true for multiplying, and you'll see a slightly different rule true for dividing. Okay? And this occurs where A is greater than or equal to 0 and B is greater than or equal to 0. So just a quick example. The square root of 4x is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of x. Square root of 4 is 2. So 2 times the square root of x there, just so you see an example of that. And then we have the quotient property of radicals. Okay, meaning dividing. And this one is the square root of a over b is equal to the square root of a over the square root of b, where a is greater than or equal to 0 and b is greater than or equal to 0. And then an example, the square root of 16 over 25 is equal to, we can split it top and bottom, the square root of 16 over the square root of 25, which is equal to the square root of 16 is 4, square root of 25 is 5, so it is equal to 4 over 5. Alright, so your book has some examples, but I'm just going to jump into the problems that I expect you to be able to do out of the homework. And so let's start with something kind of simple. Let's see. Number 4. Square root of 48. So, thinking about this one, I have a couple options of ways that I can think about this. Okay, with these ones, if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really use this method when I'm splitting apart just a number like this. I like to use the tree, and that's the way I'd highly recommend you guys doing it. Okay? And come over here, and we're doing our little tree like we've done many times before. Okay, so 48 is 4 times 12. Okay, 4 is 2 times 2. That's as simple as that can go. 12 is 3 times 4. And 4 again is 2 times 2. And that's as simple as that can go. So now I have my pairs. I have 2 2's here, and I have another set of 2 2's, but then I just have a 3 by itself, so I can pull out a 2, I can pull out another 2, and then leave the 3 inside, so that I end up with 2 times 2 is 4, is the square root of 3, and that's the answer. Let's see. So if you wanted to see it broken up like the rule, broken up would be the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. Okay, if you want to see it broken up. But if I'm going to guess, you probably didn't just know that 16 and 3 were the two options off the top of your head, which is why I recommend the tree. Because I didn't recognize 16 and 3 right off the top of my head either. Let's see. Number 6. So this one's another similar one. Square root of 72. So my recommendation is the tree. 72 is 8 times 9. 8 is 2 times 4. 4 is 2 times 2. 9 is 3 times 3. So now I group pairs of things together. And so I have a group of 3's, a group of 2's, and a 2 left over. So I pull out a 3, I pull out a 2, and I leave a 2 inside. So that gives me 3 times 2 is 6. So 6 square root of 2. Okay, if I wanted it broken up, this would be equal to the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. Okay, if you wanted to see it broken up, that's how it would be broken up. But I would do tree. Alright, let's get a little harder. This one, well, I say a little harder. It might be easier because you can just break this one up. Number 8, square root of 4x squared. Well, with this one, I can break it up pretty easily into its two parts. So this one would be the square root of 4 times the square root of x squared. Well, the square root of 4, pretty sure you all know, is 2. Square root of x squared is just x, and that would be the answer there for that one. Okay, it would be 2x. Let's see. Number 10. Alright, so number 10 is the square root of 32m to the 5th. So, my recommendation, well, you have a couple options. If you recognize what perfect square can be pulled out of this just looking at it, you can do that if you would like. If you recognize that, you'll know that it's 16 times 2 is what 32 is. So you could think about this as the square root of 16 times 2 times m to the 5th. Okay, and then you could break it out. Now, m to the 5th, okay, obviously that's 5 m's, and I can pull out 2 of them. Or, well, let me rephrase. M to the 5th, if I rewrite this as the square root of 16 m to the 4th times the square root of 2m, that's all going to stay in the radical. This then can be broken up into a separate one to be the square root of 16 times the square root of m to the 4th times the square root of 2m, which then gives you square root of 16 is 4, square root of m to the 4th would be m squared times the square root of 2m would be your answer. Now, if you did not recognize that 32 was 16 and 2, then I would say go over here. 32, you could do 4 and 8 maybe, which gives you 2 and 2, gives you 2 and 4, which gives you 2 and 2, and then you can pair them up. Got a group of 2s, another group of 2s, and a 2 left over. And then you would just pull out a 2 from each, which gives you this 4 that was pulled out, and leaving a 2 inside. And then with the m's, hopefully you recognized them in groups of 2, and that's what happened there. So if you're struggling, that is my recommendation there. Okay. So that's those. Let's see. So that's the type where you have to break it up separately. Now let's look at some that are already broken up and see if we can figure out what we need to do with them. Start with 12. Square root of 50 times the square root of 18. Okay. So, with this one, I kind of still need to break it up, even though it's already broken up. I kind of need to break it up into smaller pieces. I need to try to break it up into things that are perfect squares. So thinking about 50, okay, 50 is 25 times 2, okay, and 25 is 5 times 5. So, and this is a group here, I can pull out a 5 and be left with the square root of 2 for that one. Times, now with 18, I need to get a perfect square pulled out, so 18 is 2 times 9, and 9 is 3 times 3. That's a group there of 3s. So now I can pull a 3 out and be left with the square root of 2. And then at this point, okay, because of the rule, okay, the rule works in reverse as well. If I'm multiplying these side, giving me 15 times the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 15 times 2 is 30. So, that's that one. Okay, and these just take a lot of just playing around with them and getting used to finding the patterns of them and stuff like that. Okay, so don't get frustrated after 1 or 2. You have to go through and do several. Okay, 14. Square root of 3b cubed times the square root of 18b. Okay, so here, we already did 18, and we know that 18 lets us pull out a 3 and leave a 2 inside. So because I already did that up here, I'm just going to go ahead and do that down here. So 3 times 2, and there's a b there. I know if I'm doing stuff with b's, I can pull a b out of here because there would be 2 b's in here, leaving me with 1. So b times the square root of 3b times all of that. Now, I can multiply what's inside the radicals here, okay? And I can multiply what's outside, so 3b is on the outside. Now inside, 3 times 2 is 6, so the square root of 6 times b squared. Well, b squared obviously is just b, so I can pull that out. So that gives me 3. b times b is b squared times the square root of 6. And that would be my answer there for that one. Let's see. Actually, here, come up here. 18. Square root of 75xy times the square root of 2x cubed. So, 75, okay, we can break that up into 3 times 25, and 25 is 5 times 5. So I can pull out a 5, leaving me with 3xy inside, times, now over here I have 3 x's, okay, I have x times x times x, so I can pull out an x squared, giving me an x, so x times the square root of 2x. Now I multiply what's outside, 5x times all the stuff inside, 3 times 2 is 6, x times x is x squared, and then we have a y. Since I have this x squared in here, I can pull out another x, giving me 5, x times x is x squared, times the square root of 6y. Alright, so that's that one. Now, okay, the other kind are the ones like the bottom row, 19 through 22. Okay, they're fractions. So with these ones, we end up with, we have, here, let's see, 20 is the square root of 7 over 81. Well, according to our property, we can break that up into 2 separate radicals, giving us the square root of 7 over the square root of 81. Well, the square root of 7 I don't know, but the square root of 81 I know to be 9. So this just ends up being the square root of 7 over 9. Now, if there had been a radical on the bottom, okay, if there had been a radical left over on the bottom, we would have had to do something called rationalizing, which we'll look at in just a minute. Okay, but for that one, we can leave it like that. The last one of this type, 22, is the square root of 100 over so this one, by the property, we can break it up to be the square root of 100 over the square root of 4x squared. Square root of 100, hopefully you know that that's 10. Over the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of x squared is x. Now, I don't leave my answer this way. This isn't simplified. 2 goes into 10 5 times, so this simplifies down to 5 over x. So that's that section of problems. Okay. So now we're going to jump down to something called rationalizing the denominator. Okay, so rationalizing the denominator. Okay, with that, if you are left with a radical in the denominator, you multiply the whole thing, or you multiply top and bottom, I guess is how I should say it. Whoa. By the radical over the radical. Okay, so whatever was in the radical goes on top and on the bottom in the radical, and that cancels out that radical on the bottom, and you'll see why in just a second. Okay, so these next set of problems deal with that. So 26. Okay, we have 2 over the square root of 2. Well, the square root of 2 is irrational. Okay, it's not something I know. So I need to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, this is the process of rationalizing it. So now on top, I'm left with 2 times the square root of 2 over the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 by our thing gives us the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2, so 2 square root of 2 over 2. 2's cancel, leaving me with the square root of 2 as my answer. Okay? Now, let's see what happens with something like 28. So square root of 5 over 48. Okay? Now, before you just start multiplying here, okay, let's see if we can pull anything out first. Okay? So, let's split it. Square root of 5 over the square root of 48. Let's see, does 48 have anything we can pull out? Well, we said 16 and 3, meaning that's 4 and 4. So I can pull out a 4 and be left with a square root of 3. So, square root of 5 over 4 square root of 3. Now, this is where some people can get a little bit confused. Okay? Right here, you need to multiply by just the square root on the bottom, not the whole thing. So when we multiply this, we multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, which on the top, that gives me the square root of 5 times the square root of 3, which is the square root of 15, over 4 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9. So this simplifies to the square root of 15 over 4 times square root of 9 is 3, which then gives us the square root of 15 over 12. Alright, and then we'll do, well, I guess we'll go ahead and do 2 more. 33 over the square root of a. Okay, in this case, what we need to do, I shouldn't have written that equal sign, we'll just rewrite it. 3 over the square root of a, I got to get rid of this radical on the bottom. So I got to multiply by the square root of a over the square root of a. Which gives me 3 times the square root of a, all over the square root of a times the square root of a is the square root of a squared, which ends up giving me 3 times the square root of a all over a. Alright, and then this last one, I think that's where we will stop for today. I'll make another video thing for the very last set of problems here later. Alright, 32 is the square root of 2x squared over 5. Now, with this one, I do want to split it top and bottom, okay, by the property. So the square root of 2x squared over the square root of 5. Well, on the top I can pull out this x squared, so I can pull out an x. x times the square root of 2 over the square root of 5. I got to get rid of this radical on the bottom, so I'm going to multiply by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. X times the square root of 2 times the square root of 5 is going to give me the square root of 2 times 5 is 10. All over the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. So x times the square root of 10 over the square root of 25 is 5 is my answer. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And so that I don't confuse you, that's part of the reason we're going to stop there. Okay, so when I make the next set of little problems for you, I'll also do the worksheet worksheet videos. Okay, to explain the worksheets, like I said, I might take off some of the worksheets, so don't go through and try to do all of them. And remember, if you do your work on the page, I'm not accepting it. You have to do your work on a separate piece of paper and your answers on the worksheet page itself. So make sure you don't, mix that up, okay? I will only accept it if only the answers are on the worksheet page and I see a page of work. Otherwise, it will be 50% off, okay? It'll only be half credit if you do not do that. All right, and remember, stuff's being submitted on Google Classroom. So make sure that's where you're uploading stuff. I won't take it via email. So, all that to be said, your homework is 3 through 19, every other odd, and then 27, 29, 31, and 33 for now. Okay, and I'll tack on probably a couple more problems like I said, in the next day or so. Have a good day.